We now move, welcome everyone. I now call this regular meeting of the KCRHA Implementation Board to order. We start by grounding our work in our theory of change, which is if we create a homelessness response system that centers people with lived experience, then we will be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. Now, this is a hybrid meeting, as are all of our meetings, so there is a physical location as well as a virtual access. Our in-person location is at the City Hall, room 370, in case you want to scurry down here. We want to thank the City of Seattle for hosting us. Austin, will you please take roll?
Absolutely. Member Anderson. Member Caminos. Member Carvalho. Member Shelmanak. Member Moritz. Member McHenry Jr. Member Patnow.
Here.
Member Brandon.
Here.
Member Reddy.
Here.
Member Floyd.
Here.
Member Ross.
Here.
Alternate for Chow.
Here.
And then I'll call one more across. Member Anderson. Member Caminos. Member Carvalho.
Here.
Member Shelmanak. Member Moritz. Member McHenry Jr. Chair, we only have 7 present. We do have 4.
Thank you. Moving now to our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. We have public comment sign up.
Yes.
Austin?
Yes, public comment sign up is now active. If you want to raise your hand if you are on Zoom, or if you're here at Seattle City Hall and have not put your name on the list, please flag me down. And we'll be doing it in the order received. Sure, you want to go consent agenda?
And so we're now moving to our consent agenda. We now move to the consent agenda where we only have one item on February 2024 regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Yes. Second.
Thank you, Board Member Futrell. All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seems as though it's unanimous vote. It passes. Thank you so much. Continuing on, we are moving to CEO updates presented by our CEO, Darrell Powell. Darrell, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon. Nice to see all of you again. First, I want to start with our thoughts and prayers on Ben Moritz. You know, he's had a ski accident, and it's pretty. He's recovering, but he'll be out for a while. And so I just want to acknowledge that here, that we all know that he will be out for a while. So today marks my, I started on February 14th, so almost today marks my first full month here at KCRHA. And I would say so far my experience has been interesting. I would say interesting in a good way.
Okay.
That way. So I have some updates to share. So since taking the role, I've been getting to know the staff and the intricacies of the agency. Helen was a great guide. She was gracious enough to give me as much as she could in the 2 weeks, but there's nothing like that.
Right.
And so, I've been meeting with the teams, most recently more the programmatic team and the program adjacent programs, community impact and Ombuds and the program, just beginning to come down the learning curve of the complexities of the work that they're doing. We issued a draft proposed budget on March 6th, and the responses have been very interesting. We will get more to that in the budget conversation.
Okay.
Last week, we activated the severe weather protocols for several days because of the cold weather and the overnight temperatures. Shelter spaces opened in Soto and Shoreline, plus some existing shelter expanded capacity. These additional resources were in fact utilized. As all of you are aware, we received our first reimbursement check from Medicaid.
Oh,
And so as an additional resource, so as we continue to move down that path, we see that as a larger income stream or sub stream in the future. KCRHA's right of work. We have, which is funded by the State Department of Commerce, we have resolved 11 encampments
all right.
with 89% of the people of those encampments taking housing. We've succeeded in accessing more funds, including $26 million in increased federal and state funding. On March 27th, our team and partners will be in Olympia to present the success of the right-of-way during Governor Inslee's Washington results review on homelessness. The right-of-way is notably an example of effective collaboration across agencies and levels of government, and we look forward to continue in that vein. Quick update, point in time count. We're on track to share the final results in early May. Our community impact team continues to work with the researchers at the University of Washington to analyze the data. In conclusion, those are my updates. The transition is going well, and I believe the agency is moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. CEO Powell. Do we have any questions for him? Oh, Marvin?
Well, thank you. Great report. For the PIT information, will we be submitting it by mid-April? I think it's due April 15th. I understand we'll probably share the results in May, but are we on track for submitting it?
I would ask someone on my team to answer that. I don't have any idea.
Sorry, well, yeah,
That's fine.
just a question.
So we will track that question and get back to you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none? We now move on to public comment, which will be for 15 minutes. If you were not able to raise your hand or sign up, please do so now. We would like to remind people providing public comment to keep your comments to an agendized item. Each speaker will receive 2 minutes. Austin, would you please open public comment and call on folks in order received?
Yes. Absolutely. Hello, public comment is now open. We're gonna start with the folks here in City Hall. Is that okay? City Hall, cool. Alicia Burton is up first. Alicia, whenever you are ready, you might need to speak up a little bit, and the 2 minutes will
Yeah,
start.
may I move closer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd probably be best,
Yeah,
actually.
Okay, I can move closer. If I sit right here, will that work?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right. We have a letter that everyone should have a copy of. So we're gonna start with that. Dear council member and implementation board members, we are here today to express our concerns regarding our reimbursement from the KCRHA. Our January expenses were originally submitted for reimbursement on February 5th. It was sent back to us February 26th, asking for more information. We have been submitting invoices for over a year in the same manner as our contract stipulates. Now, without prior notification, they want changes and additional paperwork like a profit and loss statement for the month. To make matters worse, we received further communication on February 27th stating, per your contract, invoices are due by the 10th of each month and is now overdue. From the same person we just sent back to us the previous day.
And then, are you? Okay, sweet. And then Jorge, you are next and you'll get a fresh 2 minutes, so. You're good to go.
As of today, March 13th, we have still not been reimbursed for January's expenses, and a whole month has already passed. In fact, we've already submitted our invoices for the month of February. This is unacceptable. In December, they expedited the contract for 2024 to avoid delay of payment that happened during the 2023 cycle, where a lot of providers experienced hardships. It seems that KCRHA has not been fulfilling their promise to fix this issue. Nicholsville is grassroots. We're a very small organization and have very limited operating funds. As of this time, we're out $60,000 and still waiting for January reimbursement. For the sake of expediency, we have complied with what they have asked of us. Regardless, we should not have to jump through hoops. We urge you to resolve this problem as soon as possible. Sincerely, Nicholsville Central Committee.
And that is signed by everyone from Nicholsville.
Awesome. Thank you, team. And then for the record, members who are joining us virtually, I'll be scanning this and sending this in your inbox as soon as the meeting is concluded. Awesome. Harold Odom, you are next. I'm sorry, you might need to play little musical chairs if you want to over here. Yeah, that'd be best so we can hear you. Even better. Yeah, of course. And your 2 minutes starts as soon as it's good.
Good afternoon, and how are you doing, everyone? And new interim CEO Powell. I'm here, as you know, and I'm happy to hear that you're getting Medicaid, because that was a lie said that Medicaid was not going to be coming in. That's why they dismissed, from one of the reasons they dismissed the systems advocate. I have started looking for work again as of January. After coming off battling cancer, my health care was deprived of me, almost, from KCRHA. I had a great team at Swedish and they leveraged their power and got my health care back. But this is part of the indicative way that KCRHA has presented itself throughout our community as what it started out to be. And I hold you, the implementation board, solely responsible. You are the people who are overseeing it. I was on that board. 4 years of my life I spent helping set up this entity. To see it now fail the community, fail me, and fail all of my comrades who work there. Only a handful of us have received jobs because we have not received our letters of recommendation, our good standing in the community again, but the people who were in charge of us have failed up the ladder. Beth, she's still there, but she's going to work for the consulting company that helped hire her. When are you going to start having some guts and take on KCRHA and just disband it? Disband it, take it down and start all over. Burn it down and start all over because they have constantly went against what we are doing. Theory of change, I was on that committee and we set up a theory of change that was out saying we got gratitude from throughout the country because we put those who are closest to the problem up on boards, up on planning committees so they can help the problem. What has happened? You've cut it down. And the work environment has just seen people leave that agency. Thank you for your time, but I'll be back constantly.
Thank you, Harold. All righty, we now move on to the folks in Zoom. First up we have is Jade. Jade, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 2 minutes will start after that.
Thank you. Testing.
I hear you, Jade.
Testing. All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Jade. Good afternoon, board members. I just want to say real quick, I fully support everything that Brother Harold Odom just said. But my name is Jade and I'm a resident of North King County and a person with lived experience, a member of the Continuum of Care. And I was the first staffer hired on at the KCRHA, but quickly removed myself over disputes about the handling of sweeps, aka forced displacements. And I also formerly worked at the largest legal aid nonprofit in the state, where I held roles both locally and statewide. And during my time at this legal aid organization, I was a paralegal in a unit that focused on housing and consuming matters in King County, with a special focus around fair housing and residential landlord-tenant act. Throughout my experience in this role, a woeful amount of cases came through my desk that pointed to overwhelming, insurmountable systemic issues that lead to mass houselessness in King County. Systemic issues such as public funded housing authorities wrongfully evicting, aka forcibly displacing residents, and others such as transitional housing programs acting in discriminatory ways towards their most vulnerable program participants, forcing them into eviction and back onto the streets, and in the most worst cases, back into substance abuse. These housing and service programs are harming our communities instead of helping. And this particular legal aid resource, along with all the others available, is strikingly underfunded, meaning there are not enough attorneys and paralegals to help the thousands of folks in need to stay housed. The KCRHA Ombuds office should be an aid to help fill this gap and prevent people from entering houselessness. But unfortunately, as in KCRHA true form, the contracts are being violated. While the Lived Experience Coalition was majorly involved in the initial designs of the Ombuds office, the LEC, including LEC KCRHA board members, continue to be ignored while bringing up critical, legitimate concerns about how the Ombuds office is operating. I urge the implementation board to hold a special public meeting to discuss the Ombuds office, and so that the community can share our stories about our experiences with the supposed quote oversight entity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jade. Next up we have is Ruby Tuesday. Ruby, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your time will begin after that.
Check my two.
Hi, Ruby, we hear you.
All right, well, thanks. Hi, my name is Ruby, and I am a member of the Continuum of Care Board, which also serves as the advisory committee to other executive boards of KCRHA. And as a person with lived experience of homelessness, I urge the implementation board to request a transparent evaluation and public meeting to discuss the Ombuds office. If we want to know if the contract is being followed and how the grievance process actually occurs. My understanding is that it should be handling grievances extending across the services landscape, and that has been echoed in my community as not happening. They should be helping people navigate the system. And I'm also hearing reports of that not happening from my community. The other portion is that this should be a joint office that has someone that's not attached to the KCRHA, should not be housed under just the organization itself. There should be incorporation of lived experience. And basically, I want to know, if we can have a public meeting. I urge you guys to look into the actual effectiveness of how this Ombuds office is currently running as it stands, and where we can better the system and actually hear the voices of lived experience. And so thank you so much for your time, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ruby. Next up I have is Marta Kidane. Marta, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 2 minutes will begin after the test, and you begin speaking.
Test.
Hi, Marta, I hear you. Your 2 minutes begins when you start speaking.
My name is Marta Kirana, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Low Income Housing Institute. Today, we urge you to fully fund human service contracts with full inflation and COLA adjustments, and to not propose a flat or reduced budget to the governing committee. We support and appreciate KCRHA taking steps to make our Tiny House Village program whole by adding $2 million to the 2025 proposed budget. Last year, our budget was supported with one-time funds that expired this year. While the funds for 2025 are needed, we face a reduction in shelter capacity if our 2024 budget gap is not addressed. This proposal helps for next year to fill the gap and secure temporary enhanced shelter, chemical dependency, and mental health services for program participants. Lehigh also fully supports the $1.8 million for a new micro-modular tiny house village. Additionally, we strongly support the $500,000 and $225,000 allotted for overflow and severe weather shelter response. This is a great step in the right direction, and we implore this body to establish robust and permanent funding for extreme weather incidents and overnight shelter to protect human lives. In January alone, 5 unsheltered people died from the cold snap. The KCRHA 2025 budget proposed needs to be a requirement, as the increase in investment is to save lives, and an underinvestment will directly result in a loss of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Next up we have is Hallie Willis. Hallie, you've been given permission to speak. You want to unmute, test your mic. Your 2 minutes will begin after that.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I do, Hallie.
Awesome, thanks, Austin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hallie Willis, and I'm the Community Policy Manager for the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness. The proposed stabilization budget request includes some important elements to maintain levels of housing, shelter, and services. I'm happy that the proposal includes inflation adjustment to all contracts, regardless of their fund source. This is critical to help providers keep their doors open when their costs go up each year. I'm also pleased to see that the funding for contracts on one-time funding cliffs is also included. These programs represent hundreds of shelter beds and important services for hundreds of people that we can't afford to lose. But this budget can't be the best that we can do. Both the city and the county declared homelessness states of emergency years ago. The KCRHA cannot accomplish its mission by just maintaining an insufficient system during an emergency. We have to do more. We strongly recommend that the implementation board add requests for investments in additional capacity for year-round and seasonal winter shelter that meets people's needs. We also recommend that the governing committee receive a briefing on this budget request at their meeting in April as a matter of public transparency and accountability. We'll share additional comments in a letter to implementation board and governing committee members as well, and I'm happy to follow up with any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up we have is Michelle Eastman. Michelle, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 2 minutes will begin after that.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Hello, my name is Michelle Eastman, and I'm the Director of Communications for the Lived Experience Coalition. I would like to raise notice about 2 things. The need to recognize the need for a special meeting to discuss the Ombuds office and the importance of increasing funds for severe weather resources in the proposed budget. I ask you today to consider a special meeting on the Ombuds office because as the office is currently situated, it does not allow for effective independent oversight of the homelessness system that the KCRHA funds. Typically, an Ombuds office serves as an independent body that can hold the system accountable. I urge the board to hold a public meeting to reconsider the MOA that was signed to make a joint office between the LEC and the KCRHA as a compromise that provides oversight from people with lived experience. For severe weather, I thank the KCRHA for the expanded severe weather response, but it is still inadequate. I urge the KCRHA to increase severe weather responses. Also, please clarify the budgeted response, severe weather response for the coming year. Thank you for the considering these items today, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Michelle. Next up we have is Poverty Action on Zoom. If you want to unmute, test your mic, your 2 minutes will start after that.
Can you all hear me okay?
I can.
Austin, just to quickly clarify for the record, sorry,
Yeah.
my Zoom name is not actually who I'd like to be on record. You can put down Phoenica Jong with Solid Ground.
Sweet, will do.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll go ahead and start my comment then. Good afternoon, implementation board members. My name is Phoenica, and I'm calling today on behalf of Solid Ground, despite my Zoom name, to comment on the proposed 2025 budget request that you all are going to be reviewing today. We are really pleased to see that the proposed stabilization request provides inflation adjustments for all contracts. It helps maintain programs that are on fiscal cliffs, and like others spoke to, adds tiny home supports and severe weather response capacity. So thank you all so much for recognizing that providing level funding that doesn't adjust for increasing costs to providing services is actually an effective cut to programs. And just to share a couple of quick examples from Solid Ground to help kind of ground this in the reality that our program participants and organizations are facing. Our rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention programs are having to use more rental assistance dollars to keep the same number of families housed because of our high inflation environment, skyrocketing rents that people are experiencing, and higher living costs. Additionally, several of our contracts don't provide annual COLA increases, and so we are pretty challenged to find funding to help keep and hire staff that we need to provide quality services. So for reasons like this, the stabilization request is really the bare minimum to maintain the current system, and anything less will translate to less quantity and or quality of services. And then lastly, just wanted to kind of offer the reminder that maintaining the current system does not mean meeting the current need, right? And while we understand that this is a really challenging environment we're in, we're also hopeful that the RHA is able to continue working towards improving our regional homelessness response, which we believe it can't do without a budget request that at the very least maintains the current system. So thank you all so much for considering.
Thank you. Next up I have is Courtney Love. Courtney, if you'd like to unmute, test your mic, and your 2 minutes will start when you begin speaking.
Test.
Hi, Courtney, I hear you.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Courtney Love. I'm with the Lived Experience Coalition, and we are asking that this board convene a special meeting around the topic of the Ombuds office to review the build of it, the establishment of it, the agreements crafted around it, and have a public and broad discussion on the topic. Any previous discussion was one-on-one and one-sided. Need to honor the complaints that we hear from other people regarding the Ombuds office so far. Yeah, that I'm on the move today, so I'm gonna give the rest of my time back to the space. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Last I have signed up is Tamara Bauman. You've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 2 minutes will start.
My apologies. I actually did not mean to raise my hand, but I do want to support and uplift everything that has already been said regarding, the 5-year plan. And but I also want to really reinforce the idea that this has to happen in community, in relationship with each other. If we don't, we're going to continue working in silos. And as we've seen, that is absolutely not effective. And it's actually, the problem with homelessness is getting worse. So my recommendation would be to have more meetings of having deeper conversations about solutions. And those solutions are developed and led by people who are experiencing homelessness currently and who are experiencing housing instability. Those two things are critical to our lives and our well-being. So I ask that we meet, we look each other in the face, we engage as human beings to support other human beings who rely on the systems that have been set up theoretically to help them, but are not operating in that fashion. So the best way that I can think of how to do that is that we strengthen our safety net. And you have to do that in relationship and in community with each other. I just went and saw King X at Acts on Stage the other night, and really, really reinforced also why racial equity and justice have to be incorporated into every solution. Otherwise, the hierarchical structures that we're existing in right now only serve to perpetuate inequities. So we have to start thinking differently about how we do this work, how we make policy, and who should be at the table. Is the people who are experiencing the problem. They are also the ones best suited to create the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more on Zoom, and T is the Zoom username. T, if you would like to unmute, test your mic, and then in a few minutes we'll begin there. And if you'd like,
Okay,
hello.
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Would you like to add a name to the record?
Well, I'm Talil Rashay. I'm a part of the LEC. I wanted to talk in behalf of the rent stabilization and focusing on how we are going to be able to address it with the new strategy to be able to get it accepted. And by all that means, I feel that might have to take for a more collaborative effort among different committees to be able to work together, to be able to come up with a better compromise, to be able to, get the point through, because the more the better, pretty much. So I'm thinking if we can be able to come up with a better strategy upon that, we can actually be able to get the rent stabilization approved for once, which I really will hope for.
Thank you. Chair, I see nobody more in Zoom. Anybody in the Seattle City Hall would like to add their name? Going once, twice, sold. Public comment is closed.
Thank you, Austin. We'd like to move on with our agenda. We are on our first order of business, the Ombuds report. As required by the ILA, the Ombuds team will give their report twice a year. KCRHA and team, please take it away.
Hey everyone, I can't see what you see, but can you see our presentation on the screen? Is that all you see on the screen is the presentation?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So good afternoon, Chair and members of the Implementation Board. My name is KCRHA Jordan, use she, her pronouns, and I serve as KCRHA's Chief Ombuds. Now I'm pleased to introduce KCRHA's Ombuds team to this board for the first time. My colleagues, today I'm joined by Gail Hartman, who is our Deputy Ombuds, and our 3 Ombuds colleagues, Marilyn Castellan, Mary Dunbar, and Ishiki. Now, we are a team of 5 with very diverse backgrounds who all bring a perspective of having lived experience to this work. We also share 55 years of combined professional experience in homeless response services, including working among various systems across diverse subpopulations, such as veterans, families, youth, refugees, trans and gender nonconforming, community mental health, and survivor services. Now, for today's presentation, we will present a brief overview of our 2023 report, including a refresher of the Ombuds Office. We have who we have served to date, trends we are noticing, and provide other updates about the current work of the office. Now, we will release a more comprehensive version of this report along with our first quarter 2024 data report on KCRHA's Ombuds website at the end of this month. Now, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Raphael.
Thank you, KCRHA. Again, my name is Raphael. And before we get started, just to ensure we make the most of our limited time, we kindly ask that you please hold off on any questions until the end of our presentation. So the KCRHA Ombuds Office receives complaints and questions about an agency and/or organizations and the services they provide in the King County homelessness response system. So our aim is to work with all parties to help resolve issues and, where appropriate, make recommendations for agency and system improvements. Our office was intentionally created to promote public confidence in KCRHA's ability to serve people experiencing homelessness effectively, efficiently, and equitably. So that means the Ombuds Office is an accountability mechanism within King County's homelessness response system that provides system constituents with access to a fair process. We provide a path for people to be heard regarding services or other issues that affect them. We also work to help people understand the reasons behind the decisions of organizations or other system actors. And when possible, we work with all parties to address issues and complaints raised by members of the public. We engage with the community by phone, email, online forums, and in person so that they're aware of the Ombuds office. We're also tasked to listen, observe, and make recommendations on issues affecting the homelessness response system. So the hope is that if we foster continued engagement with those who touch the homeless response system and share what we learn with other system components, KCRHA and our system partners can devise changes and improvements that will result in better outcomes and improved homeless service delivery. Next slide, please. So the ILA, or the interlocal agreement, also limits the scope of the Ombuds work to the following areas. So program administration, policies, delivery of services, and other activities overseen by the authority. And when we say other activities overseen by the authority, that can include, but not limited to, the continuum of care responsibilities, such as coordinated entry or the homeless management information system. It's important to note that while these are the areas that the Ombuds office has the authority to review, the Ombuds office does not have enforcement power, and we cannot compel the authority or anyone to implement a recommendation. We provide recommendations, and then we advocate for those recommendations either internally or externally. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, so the Ombuds office serves community members that are served by a KCRHA funded program living in King County, KCRHA funded service providers, and employees or contractors of the KCRHA. However, it's important to make the distinction that this does not include personnel or HR related issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so this next slide is an image of our Ombuds submission workflow. So the way it works is that in Ombuds, we'll do an initial review and intake. A submission is then staffed by the team and assigned to one team member who will then assess the best service to provide to help address the issue. So we have grouped these services into 5 categories: assistance and facilitation, information and referral, external review, program review, or investigation. So with assistance and facilitation, we work to resolve the issue through asking questions of appropriate parties, researching the issue, and facilitating conversation or the sharing of information between affected parties. So this often looks like our team working to bridge the gap between the program participant and the provider. Next, we have information and referral. So we would educate and provide information about resources in King County and provide information about services that people can be referred to. Next, we have external review. So with this, we would document an issue related to a provider that's not contracted by the KCRHA, but we'll still do our due diligence to raise the issue with the provider or oversight agency to resolve. Next, we have investigation. So this could be a programmatic or systemic investigation, and it's our most formal and comprehensive service. Before proceeding with an investigation, we'll conduct a thorough case assessment to determine if launching an investigation is the most appropriate course of action. And during the assessment process, we will consider various factors such as the severity and urgency of the situation, the number of people affected, and our office priorities. So this helps us determine if an investigation is the most appropriate action for a particular issue. And then lastly, we have program review. So if an issue does not rise to the level of an investigation, but it is something concerning enough, the Ombuds office will escalate a matter to KCRHA's program team. So unlike the external review, this is used in situations where a submission pertains to an agency contracted by the KCRHA. And then for our services or for internal services, the Ombuds office will monitor progress. We will monitor the response to the issue, and will also track data for transparency and accountability. With that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Marilyn, who will be sharing more about our data on who we've served, types of concerns, services offered, and case examples.
Thank you, Rafael, and thank you, Implementation Board, again for having us. My name is Marilyn Castellan, and I'll be kicking off some of our data. In 2022, we had 115 total contacts, and in 2023, we had 536 total contacts. And this was an increase of 366%. We attribute the rise to increased capacity in our office as we grew our team from 2 to 5 in August of 2023. We also launched community engagement in October of 2023, which started to grow our reach. Next slide, please. So as Rafael mentioned, we received submissions in a few different forms, and we categorize them as concern or comment, complaint, a request for support or systems facilitation. So comments or concerns are a more general inquiry where a constituent may provide an observation or feedback about their experience, a service, program, or express their general unease about a problem or situation that they think needs attention. A complaint is when a constituent is expressing dissatisfaction about actions taken or the lack of action taken. And support and system facilitation is when a constituent is seeking help with information resources. So concerns or comments made up about 5% of our submissions. Since concerns and comments are typically not considered actionable, we respond and attempt to resolve them informally. We do, however, document concerns and comments as they can inform trends, even if no follow-up or more in-depth assistance is required. Complaints made of about 20% of our submissions. And these can be individual or system complaints. We're able to act on these submissions if they fall within our scope and specifically related to agencies contracted with the RHA. And then support and system facilitation made up the bulk of our submissions at about 75%. And with these submissions, we provide information about how our homeless services system functions, resources, and often provide warm handoffs through direct referrals to providers. Next, I'll share about how the Ombuds responds to these submissions through the services that Rafael just defined for us. Next slide, please. Assistance and facilitation accounted for 12% of our services. And again, this can be as simple as linkage to an external resource. External review accounted for just 1%. And like Rafael defined, this is when agencies are not contracted with KCRHA. And so, we tend to kind of focus our energy where we can have most impact, but we do still try to elevate concerns and share recommendations and these type of services as well. And information and referral made up 72% of our services. And this is reflective of support and system facilitation being the bulk of our submissions. We often see that people, need assistance navigating, understanding where to connect to, and we're happy to provide that. And then lastly, investigation made up just 1% of our services. And again, complaints would only move into an investigation depending upon seriousness of the issue, urgency, number of people affected, and community concern. No response made up 8%, and this is in instances where we lose contact with the constituent, so they either don't respond or there's no follow-up. Other made up 6%, and this is where service categories may overlap, specifically with information referral. And then program review made up 3% of our services, which again is where, if a agency our providers contracted with KCRHA were able to take more action and provide more in-depth support through our collaboration with programs team. Next slide, please. And how does this show up in action? We wanted to provide a few case examples, and for the sake of time, I'll just go through two. So one example here is we were able to facilitate conversations between a family and shelter provider about a family member's passing. So this submission came to our office as a concern through the family. The Ombuds were able to utilize a program review to raise the concern to the KCRHA program staff, which resulted in the facilitated conversations that were able to provide clarity of shelter policies and processes to the family. And another example here is we collaborated with the provider to modify intake policy that violated the Fair Chance Ordinance and posed a barrier to access individuals with criminal records. And this submission came to our office as a complaint. The Ombuds reached out to the provider to express our concerns. The provider was more than willing to collaborate with us to resolve the issue and amend their intake policy to reflect the Fair Chance Ordinance. And we were able to also document this through a program review of the actions that were taken. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Em, to share more of our data.
Thanks, Marilyn. And thank you, board, for having us today. My name's Em, I use she, they pronouns, and I'm just going to be going over some of the demographics that we've collected since June of 2023. That was when our Ombuds request form was launched, and the following data represents a smaller sample of the total number of people served. Also, this data is self-disclosed and constituents self-identify their prospective demographics. As we continue to refine our data set, we're learning about the servicing and additional community outreach needed. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing the presentation here.
Does
Yeah,
look like screen
it went
share.
away.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
We'll just pull it up for you so that y'all can see the graphic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll pull it up.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Apologies, everybody. Some technical difficulties over here. Just one more minute.
Thank you, Marilyn. And it's slide 11. Thank you. And while we're enlarging that for y'all, just wanted to highlight some of the demographics that we pulled in regards to race collected from June, December 2023. Just over 20% of our form collected African American and Black constituents, Asian 1%, Caucasian 43%, Hispanic 2%, Latinx 2%, multiracial 3.7%, Native American AI 1%, and we also have collected for not stated and other 22%. A combination of something not captured by our options. And again, we're working on refining our data. And just wanted to highlight that Black and African American constituents represent just 7% of King County population, but are over 20% of the folks calling into our office with concerns or complaints about homelessness services. This may be perhaps to the historical impacts of systemic oppression that ripple out into institutional racism, which undermine the ability of many people of color to maintain stable housing and also raise their concerns to offices like ours. And two, it also tells us that we need to do a better job at connecting to our Native American, Alaskan Native, Asian, Hispanic, Latinx, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities in our county. We're seeking community engagement and support in translating our materials for ease of access and would love your collaboration if you have any ideas. Next slide. And I believe slide 12, one more. Yeah, perfect. This slide tells us a lot about who we have reached and who we're needing to outreach to, driving our community engagement strategies for specific interventions and community building, with female folks coming in at 42%, male at 32%, non-binary folks at 6%, 10% not stated, and other as another category at 1%, trans folks at 1%, trans men at 1%, and trans women at 2%, and Two-Spirit at 1%. Historically, government agencies have not serviced nor held complaints and concerns with confidentiality, which poses a barrier to both trans and gender nonconforming folks. And this data highlights that we need to support and create a more comfortable opportunity for people to report to our office with confidence and that their concern is met with tangible needs and support post-incident. Next slide, please. And for demographics of our region, where we receive concerns, you'll see Seattle is at 60%, South King County at 20%, East King County at 14%, and North King County at 3%. We have been building connections with and getting information about this region from our community engagements. And I just wanted to point out too that majority of our contracted agencies are within Seattle city limits, as our funding does come from City of Seattle, with additional King County contracts throughout the region. This data reflects to our office what we wish to pay more attention to in regards to regions we wish to address and engage with. We are tracking unincorporated and rural King County, places like Skyway, Vashon, Skykomish, but have not received any reports from these areas. Next slide. And we were able to gather information on length of homelessness, with under 6 months coming in at 29.89%, under a year 12.64%, 1.5 years 14.94%, 3 to 4 years at 6.9%, and 4+ years at 27.59%. And also we gathered information on folks currently not experiencing homelessness at 8.05%. And typically this is staff or loved ones who are engaging with homelessness services. So even providers within our system. We have observed this data aligns with our experience working in direct service, entering the system under a year of homelessness, and 4+ years of homelessness is the bulk of that data. We're engaging with people who are novice at accessing homelessness systems, as well as folks who have utilized it for a significant amount of time and need support connecting to services that offer high levels of support and may need additional advocacy for entry. And I'm going to pass it off to Mary to talk about systems trends as well as what we're doing in the community.
Thank you, Em. My name's Mary Dunbar, and I use she, her pronouns. I'll start by sharing out some of the trends we've noted from our data that we wanted to raise up. The first being that there continues to be barriers to community members accessing homeless services such as emergency shelter, coordinated entry housing assessments, and permanent housing resources. Next up, we found that there's insufficient case management and housing navigation resources to help nominate people for housing once their coordinated entry assessment has been completed. Next, we found that there are no standard policies or practices amongst shelter providers. Exits, grievance policies, shelter curfews, and length of stay all differ from shelter to shelter. Next up, we found that there's a high demand for prevention services. We, as you've seen from our data, have a high level of requests for information and referral resources, specifically around rental assistance and eviction prevention programs. Next trend we found is that there is scarce technical assistance capacity to resolve complex issues. There's really a need for increased staffing within KCRHA to provide the technical assistance, such as coaching around contract requirements and best practice, as well as capacity building to support changes in agency behaviors and reflected in their practice. Next trend is that there are truly inadequate confidentiality standards for those that contact our Ombuds office. As a government agency, all of our records are subject to public disclosure requests. This reality makes it challenging for our constituents to contact us with their issues or concerns, since they fear retaliation. This is especially true for frontline staff working in shelter, outreach, and housing programs who've expressed concerns about the possibility of retaliation or losing their jobs. Additionally, many providers have shared that they fear raising concerns about a partner agency, as this may result in either their clients or organizations losing essential services. However, we're working within our limitations to maintain confidentiality. Nevertheless, we could be more effective as an Ombuds office if we could better protect the confidential information of our constituents, who often share very sensitive and vulnerable information with us. Finally, we found that there is inconsistent fidelity to the permanent supportive housing model. Permanent supportive housing in King County is not necessarily permanent and not nearly supportive enough to provide the level of services needed by people with high acuity. Next slide. Our community engagement strategy was developed by our team from a place of recognition that we need to hear directly from people with current lived experience about their concerns, complaints, and the resources they feel are needed to move into stable housing. We began community mapping and engaging community partners in conversations about how best to engage with their programs, to learn about what types of community events are happening around King County, and get suggestions of where to meet directly with people with lived experience. I'd like to give a big thank you here to both Abby and Mallory with the KCRHA sub-regional planning team for facilitating these initial introductions to the various regional meetings. As you can see from the slide, our community engagement strategies have included presenting at homeless service provider meetings and offering regional mobile clinics at resource fairs. Moving forward, we plan to rotate our attendance at resource fairs by subregions of King County each quarter. We'll also use our data about community contacts to thoughtfully engage with specific areas and community groups across King County. So our trends and data are driven by diverse populations across race, gender, and geography. Other types of community engagement events will include monthly constituent office hours, provider office hours, focus groups, And we hope to plan an annual Ombuds 101 training to share more information out to the community about our office. We feel that our strategy of community engagement and connecting with people who have current lived experience is in alignment with our KCRHA theory of change. All of the information gathered through our contacts and community engagement events inform the trends and identify the system issues, which we then discuss with our programs and leadership at the KCRHA, ultimately driving systems change. Next slide. Finally, here's an outline of our Ombuds Office work for 2024. We'll continue to respond to inquiries and concerns, enhance our community engagement, develop promising practices based on constituent trends, and systems planning, promote the transparency of our Ombuds office by updating our website to include a dashboard of constituent data, our upcoming community engagement events, our Ombuds primer, our annual report, our brochure and poster, and all translated outreach materials. Finally, we will publish our 2023 annual report and update that for 2024. Next slide. I want to thank you for your time, Implementation Board, and now turn it back to you all for any questions.
Thank you so much, Mary, and the rest of the Ombuds team. We appreciate you coming and giving us your report. I see one hand up. I have Keisha Brandon.
Yes, thank you. Pardon me if I missed some of the history, but I don't recall any of the at least some of the establishment of the Ombuds office, which was directly resulted from the advocacy of the LEC. A lot of, from the beginning, the LEC was very, very vital in the upcoming of the Ombuds office. So we partnered and designed a lot of these information and the voices of concern of the experience question and what we wanted to see be done, and raise a lot of issues, you know, with system partners being accountable and addressing our issues and maintain commitment to the system improvement. And so I didn't really hear much about that in the history or the beginning of how the ombudsman office was started. And so I would just like to have everyone understand that. And then moving forward, I had some I guess I don't want to say complaints, but just had a question as to, I appreciate the pretty bow-tied slide, but there were some things missing for me, like what, in other words, like the rubric. What kind of rubric is being used to, in the case that's been investigated, who or what will be determining whether or not a case is even open, and how will you report back all of that information? What ways are you asking for these policymakers and shelters and organizers or organizations to be accountable, and how you're including those that report a part of the solution if you're asking them exactly what they would like to be done? So are you including those with those experience in every step of your solution making, holding policymakers accountable? Where do we fall in place of that? From being a part of this from the beginning, there's a lot of cracks that are left open where the lived experience still falls short. Well, you can implement as much as you want, but when they're not going to, consider the things that we're saying from something that we helped design, to be honest, designed, and hired and screened the whole team that is a part of the system, how are we the ones that are falling in between the cracks? Well, we should be a part of the whole system. We should be a part of the slide. Where were we at when these slides were being made? Because I don't remember being part of it. And I remember being at that Plymouth church when I sat there with all those experienced people, including myself, and we came up with markers, and we had the sheets of paper, and we sat in these groups for hours and weeks on end, and came up with all these ideas for it to just be, oh, we're gonna pop up when we're ready and put these things in slides and show the community what we've been working on and the task. You know, we can only do so much. It's up to them what they really want to do. That's not good enough for me. It's not good enough for the lived experience. We want to be a part of each and every part. And we want you guys to push and push and push until the efforts are made, until solutions are solved. Don't keep coming and asking for solutions when they've been thoroughly thought out and handed to you on the silver platter. What more is there to ask for from us? We're giving you exactly what you wanted. All you have to do is follow suit and keep us a part of that alignment. You will have no issues. All we have to do is continue to push and hold them accountable. We won't have no 5-year plans. We won't have any 10-year plans. Thank you. And I would like to answer.
Are you not finished? Okay. Board Member Brandon, were you
She had
finished?
a question.
Yes, my question, if you didn't hear it, was what type of rubric is being used if a case is to be investigated, and who or what will be determining whether or not the case is even open, and how will you report back all of that information?
Is that okay if I answer a smidgen of it?
I don't care who answers.
Around our program reviews. So, our offerings include external reviews, program reviews, and investigations. So when we have complaints that are related to a King County Regional Homeless Authority contract, we meet with our programs team, and maybe another time when we can come to the board, we can offer our process of what it is to collaborate with our programs team. And we follow alignment with the project service agreements to make sure that the complaint is in violation of the shared agreement between the contracted agency and KCRHA. And we work in tandem with the program performance team to offer recommendations and work with the agencies so that they can mitigate the issue. When it comes to external reviews, we do offer it to the agencies. For example, King County, there's some contracts that are over at King County that we are not in possession of. And so if there's a complaint with an agency that is working with King County or even adjacent systems, we tend to contact whoever, whether it's the funder or even accountability legs like OBHA is a partner that we have worked with, the Office of Behavioral Health Advocates, or previously the Office of Behavioral Health Ombuds. And we like to ensure that they are part of the process that we took the complaint so that we've received it, but we may not have oversight. And our recommendations kind of give it back to the programs team or external entities to take care of. Investigations involve multiple reviews that address systemic issues, whether it's with agencies or a systemic issue. So that's kind of the broad overview of what we have, and team, if I missed anything, please feel free to hop off mute.
Thank you. I do want to offer for those teams, making sure that there's lived experience within those teams. I think that would help you guys a long way. Thank you.
Thanks, Keisha. And if you have questions about our process, happy to answer.
Thank you, Keisha and M. I see Simha with his hand up. Board Member Ready.
Thank you, Chair Floyd. I just want to take a moment and say, I think you are doing really outstanding work in the Ombuds office. Like, this is an incredibly hard job you are doing that is, people in our system have never had a way to share their concerns or complaints and actually have them heard and then have a feedback mechanism. And this is, frankly, I think incredible that, you know, starting with a team of, well, frankly, just KCRHA, and then one other person for most of this time, and then growing to, you know, a group of 5 people, you've been able to address so many concerns. And I especially like the examples that you provided, right? Because they were not just about connecting a person to a service, they were about going back to agencies, providing feedback, and then seeing change happen, right? Like changing in entrance criteria, for example, to be in compliance with, you know, fair housing standards, or sorry, it's not quite the right terminology, but and what I am hearing from you is that, like, the approach that you are taking is not one that is punitive to start, certainly, but rather a collaborative one. Can we get this? Can we make this better, right? Can we make this system more effective for the people it serves? So I'm really grateful to you. I do want to acknowledge that the LEC was instrumental in pushing for the, you know, importance of the Ombuds office, and, you know, Chair Odom, who was, you know, spoke earlier today, like, you know, it really pushed hard for the Ombuds office to be, you know, one of the very first positions created, and I think that was an important piece of this history. But I think KCRHA, you've created something really remarkable here. So thank you for that. I do have one question, which is, you know, this issue of confidentiality is, you know, it's very concerning, frankly. And I'm wondering what approaches may be possible, and like what you've been able to explore with our legal department or similar kind of ombuds offices.
I'll take on that question. So the reality is it will require a state law change. And we know that there's other ombuds offices, for example, the child welfare ombuds, where all of their information is kept confidential, and other ombuds offices that are connected to kind of public entities. It has to be put in statute, right? And most ombuds offices are created at the state level, but you have like your city of Seattle, you have your King County ombuds, and they're likely also subject to the same public disclosure requirements. But the reason why we're pushing this forth is that we're dealing with individuals who have very vulnerable and sensitive situations, right? And those should not be, right, for public consumption always. And so I think that's the concern that we're raising. It would require more of a state level change, but we just want to make people aware of that's just something that we're navigating. And, you know, one of the things that I'm not sure if it was highlighted in Mary's conversation about community engagement, but also really being able to connect and work with providers is huge to this work. And I think you pointed that out when you said that we're not trying to take an adversarial process, because providers are often our first line partners in being able to resolve things quickly, right? And, you know, in that situation with the Fair Chance Ordinance Act, you know, that provider that we were working with, they were so willing to collaborate with us and change their policies. And it resulted, right, in eliminating a huge barrier. And so if we can continue to kind of establish those close relationships, so where providers do feel comfortable, you know, coming to us, not just about things that are happening individually with their program, right, but things that are happening at a systemic level. And so I think that's something that we'll continue to raise. Hopefully we'll get other ombuds offices on board with that kind of, you know, advocacy policy change, but we did want to raise it. And I think what we're trying to do as much as possible, you know, sometimes we have to talk to people directly on the phone. Sometimes we have to be the ones who are filling out, right, the form to keep it anonymous. So we're doing what we can within the limitations, but I do just want to raise that it is a state level issue, but that is still impacting the constituents that we serve. The other thing I just really want to touch on, I know that there's a lot about, you know, is our office centering people with lived experience? And I will even like use Marvin's language where, you know, we're making them visible, right? To your point, Simha, we are one of 2 homeless systems in the country that actually has an ombuds office. Now, there's other places that have contacted us, like Vancouver or even Sacramento, that is trying to establish an ombuds office, right? And I think it's really important because we are opening an opportunity for a fair process. Now, people may not like the answers that we give, right? But we're able to provide people with answers, and that is huge. And the other thing I want to raise also, we speak with people on a daily basis who are currently navigating the system, who are currently experiencing homelessness. All of our processes, all of our policies have been influenced in real time by people who are experiencing homelessness. So I just kind of want to, clarify that narrative that we are not including people with lived experience, because it's not true. I also made it very clear at the beginning of our presentation that we each come from lived experience, right? But it's not enough just to have lived experience in doing this work. You also have to have a system analysis, right? And we also bring this professional experience to this work that we do, and we will continue to do that, and we will continue to elevate those who are experiencing homelessness. And I can tell you, every single person on my team cares deeply and passionately about this work, or we would not be here doing this work.
Thank you very much, Ms. KCRHA Jordan. And I hate to cut you off, darling, but it is 3:18, and in order to stay on time for my agenda, I need to move forward to the next thing. But thank you very much for your team. I appreciate that.
With that, this is not a great amount of time. I do know in the past that the Ombuds office may have met with implementation board members, with new ones coming on and others. I would like to move that we actually have a special meeting for learning more about the Ombuds office and its charges. And its work. Can we do that? Somebody help me here, because
Yeah,
maybe
so the motion is to establish a special meeting on the Ombuds office. There will need to be a second, and there will need to be a majority affirmative vote of the board to have that occur.
So we've had a motion to have a special meeting of the Ombuds office, board members. I need a second in order for that to move forward. I'll second that. Is there any discussion?
I just wonder, because the board is not super new with each other, and KCRHA and team, well, KCRHA has offered previously to do kind of one-on-ones or smaller groups. Because the board is not that new, I would recommend that. I don't think that it's a good use of all of our time when that was already offered.
Thank you, board member Kavala.
in a response, while it is a good use of time, this is a public agency. It is a public operating piece of said agency, and I don't think the public has gotten a chance to get to know the Ombudsman's office, its design, and the work that it can actually do. Right now, they've already reported that they worked with 533 cases out of a county with 50,000 homeless people. It is just, for me, a hard thing to grasp that if we can't expand the capacity of a good ombudsman's office so that it reaches the people who are engaging with the system, but may not yet have touched the system. I have a list of things that they reported out that I would just love clarity on, and I believe it's good information for the public to have. It's why I made the motion.
I agree with you, Marvin, and I think that KCRHA and her team can say otherwise. Respectfully, I disagree. I think that they've showed up. I think that they've explained their work. I feel good about it. I mean, but you know what? I'm all about a democratic process, so we can put it to a vote.
You can ask me to do a roll call.
Can you do a roll call, please, Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. Member Anderson?
Yes.
Member Caminos, don't think it's on. Member Carvalho?
No.
Member Shelmanak? Member Shelmanak? I'll come back. Member Moritz is not on. Member McHenry Jr.?
No.
Member Patno?
No.
Member Brandon? Member Brandon. I'll come back. Member Ready,
No.
Member Floyd? Or
Yes.
Chair Floyd? Member Ross,
No.
Member Futrell.
Yes, I
I
made the motion. I really meant yes. I'd be more than happy to submit the list of questions to Austin. We'd really like to hear back from the Ombuds office more than just twice a year. I know that's what they're required to do, but we're not building any relationships. And we're definitely moving from a community-oriented agency to a systemic-oriented agency. And that should be public-facing and not just stuff that happens behind closed doors. Thanks.
I do need to finish the roll call. Member Shelmanack. And Member Brandon.
Yes.
Chair, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nays. The motion fails.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to move on to our second order of business. But before we move forward, I'd like to thank the Ombuds team for being here. One thing that I took from all of this is that the Ombuds team that I thought was set up for the homelessness people is not set up for the homelessness people. It is set up for people who are part of the RHA's program. So therefore, it is an Ombuds office for the RHA, which is system and not people. I want to say that before I move on.
I'm not sure that that's. I'm sorry, Chair
Go
Floyd.
ahead. Go ahead,
I'm not
Board
sure
Member.
that I agree with that assessment of it. The Ombuds office receives concerns,
But
many
it said
concerns, I think.
that, it said that it only deals with people who are contracted with the RHA. Forgive me if I misquoted that. Is that wrong? I see Mary shaking her head.
Yeah, thank you, Jaja. I just want to clarify, that's not correct. We take complaints from any person either directly using services within the homeless response system or working in. What you're referencing is that our office is limited by the contracting. There's only certain contracts for services that are housed within the RHA. Only those contracted service providers do we have actual oversight of, in that we work with our programs teams to identify concerns and provide technical assistance to those agencies. Agencies that aren't contracted with the RHA, the most that we can do is submit an external program review in hopes that they, as good faith partners in the homeless response system, will take action to improve their services. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Ms. Dunbar. Yes, that does clarify for what you said. But because I did take it as you only work for the RHA, and the people of lived experience living and work using their services are the only ones that you can help. But you're telling me that is not the case. That if this young lady from Nicholsville needed your services, you would reach out to help her if she came to you.
Well, sure, they're a funded program. My question is, if 50% of the homeless response in King County is done by uncontracted, unfunded agencies, or gets passed through money from places that are not given, how are those response systems being able to be held accountable? And we clearly know from the sub-regional planning group, there are tens of thousands of folks that we're not even touching because the system creates barriers that doesn't allow it to expand to meet the need. And once again, I don't want to have this conversation if we're not talking about the need of the whole community across King County.
With that, I'm sorry, I do have to move on.
Yep.
Okay, I am way over time here. And we now need to move on to our second and last item of business on our agenda, which is stabilization budget presentation given by Jeff, James, and Tiffany. And note that we are not voting on the budget now, but we're receiving this presentation as it is such a large order of business. And thank you for giving me grace, giving me overtime, James, Tiffany, and Jeff. Take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody. And we're used to being a little bit faster when we have to be. So we'll try to save everybody a little time. Before we get started, Tiffany, I think you're going to share the presentation. I just want to point out that our 2024 contracts have been completed. 90% of them were completed in January. The other remaining 10% got finished in February. And the reason I bring that up, it's really important for people to understand that that allows us to service all of our providers. So all of our providers have been able to submit invoices in January on time and have been reimbursed. If all the documentation was set up, they have been reimbursed. And February invoices have even been submitted, and we are now processing February invoices. We, though, are an agency and we are regulated and we have monitoring and we are audited. So therefore, we will have to require additional documentation. So having these contracts completed early and being able to be on time, we now have the ability to properly process the invoices. And so therefore, there are going to be times where we will require additional documentation. As noted in the earlier public comments, we did look it up, and both the January and February invoices are in the final stages of approval and should be paid. I think they're scheduled to be paid tomorrow or Tuesday. So that's good news there. So that's happening. But we're here to talk about our 2025 proposed budget. And so to the components that make up the proposed budget, we have the base budget, which is level funding from year over year to maintain the ongoing projects that we do. We also have some continued one-time funding. Most of those coronavirus relief funds from the federal government, most expired in 2024 or will expire in 2024. And so we're looking for ways to fix those cliffs. And then the third component was some incremental changes and enhancements that we did to make that happen. 2024 at a glance, you see there's a lot of things that went into building this budget, and the IB budget committee was instrumental in guiding us through this process. In today's meeting, we are presenting this proposed budget, but we did receive some additional communications from some of our funders, City of Seattle and King County. They are going to be providing us feedback in April, I think April 1st and April 19th, that will allow us to make some adjustments to this proposed budget. But this was a really good starting point for us to have a good stabilization budget. And then as we get guidance from those funders and what they're going to do, we'll make those changes. And in May, we'll have another presentation to show you what those changes are. And then to be able to submit it to both the city and the county on June 1st. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany Brooks for her to just run through these details with you.
Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for joining us today. You've seen a variation of this just recently in January when we went over our 2024 budget for you guys to approve. We are now going over the 2025 budget. We do want to highlight within the time period that we've had our budget approved for 2024. During our presentation, we did notate that we were diversifying our funding and that we were anticipating some additional funds coming on board in 2024. So I want to just point out that we do have a revised 2024 budget column over here where it's accounting for some of those increases in funds that we received between the time that you approved our 2024 budget to now when we're presenting our proposed 2025 budget. In 2025, as James said, we are looking to just ensure that we have a stabilized budget, that we are not experiencing any funding cliffs for our programs, and we're not closing any programs. And so we are anticipating level funding and projecting and proposing to have level funding with the addition of inflation dollars to ensure that these programs receive inflation in 2025 and to sustain some of the programs that have funding cliffs in 2024 to continue into 2025. Some of the sustainability or all of the sustainability budget requests that we will be presenting to you guys today is for a statutory inflation increase. It's to ensure that those contracts that we receive from the city of Seattle and from King County receive that inflationary increase in 2025. We also are presenting to have a $5.9 million funding cliff funding to ensure that we do not have, I believe about 12 City of Seattle contracts go unfunded in 2024. And for King County, it's roughly about 6 contracts. So we'll have the details in the next slides. We're also looking to continue our COC inflationary funds that we received from the City of Seattle in 2025, as well as sustain some funding that we receive for tiny house villages to maintain mental health and behavioral health support services. And then the last one for the City of Seattle is a $2.4 million request that we're asking to ensure that we provide continued funding for a shelter that is currently funded with general funds and Clifford dollars, which will be expiring at the end of this year. For King County, we have our BitFocus HMIS system, which is the homeless management information system that we have. We have a contract that we maintain with BitFocus to ensure that agencies are able to enter their homelessness data into the system, and it is documented and recorded. That database is increasing its contract amount by $300,000 this year in 2024 for a 2-year period through 2026. And so we are seeking funds to ensure that we can sustain that increase in 2025 through 2026. As mentioned earlier, we have the prevention of closures of some programs that were originally opened and funded by King County with some ARPA funds, which are COVID dollars, and those dollars are scheduled to expire at the end of this year. And so we are seeking to sustain those programs in 2025 with level funding and inflationary increase. Excuse me. The last request for King County would be for our severe weather requests. That is to provide some funding to ensure that we have a regional severe weather approach in our community, as well as ensure that we have funds available to contract with providers, just like we do with the City of Seattle funds, so that we have staffing available during severe weather events to help cover shelter needs for severe weather events when we do need to go into the maximum severe weather level tier. This slide is giving you the breakdown of each of those requests that we just went through. This is for the City of Seattle. And the memo goes into a lot more detail for each of these items. And this is for King County. Our Schedule B is providing all of our funding by funder and fund source for those particular funders. We're anticipating, or we're proposing, a budget of $112 million. I'm sorry, $112 million from the City of Seattle, $67 million from King County, $69 million from HUD COC, and $20 million from the Department of Commerce for right-of-way work, for a total of $269 million. Our Schedule C is a breakdown of our funding proposal by our funder, City of Seattle, by program type, as well as the fund source that we're anticipating to receive from the City of Seattle. It is identifying a recapture of outreach and prevention funds that are anticipated to start at the end of this year or mid-year this year, and then into next year for outreach services. And then it is also tacking on our stabilization proposal for budget requests to ensure that we have sustained funding for programs that had a funding cliff and provide continued inflation dollars in 2025. King Counties is doing the same. It is going over our programs, funding sources, as well as a stabilization request for the programs that have a funding cliff at the end of this year to ensure that they have funding in 2025, as well as an anticipated inflation for 2025. Schedule C for our other fund sources is documenting it for Continuum of Care and Department of Commerce right-of-way funds. For 2025, we have a proposed budget of $15.4 million. We've been listening to your feedback over the years and are working on a better way to format our operation budget and present it to you guys. And so there will be a shift in the way that this is presented in our final budget submission to you guys later in the next couple months. This is a presentation of the overall budget proposal again. And then even though we did not include it in our proposal, we did want to point out that we do have other costs that we would like to include in our budget or that we like to share with you guys that is of interest of the KCRHA, which is a new village or micro modular unit. We're looking at a total of $1.8 million for that. And then also overnight overflow basic shelter of $500,000. Prior to COVID-19, we did have in the region several shelters that opened for just nighttime shelter services. And a lot of those were with faith-based organizations in different locations throughout the region. And we're seeking to leverage funds so that we can continue to serve people and bring that service back in our community. And now I will open the floor for questions, and Jeff and James will help me respond to your questions.
Thank you, Tiffany. Do I have any hands? And before I see hands, I wanted to say, Tiffany, on that last one, it said $500,000 and it was going to service up to 30 to 50 people. That doesn't seem like very many people for that much money. Can you explain that a little bit to me?
Yes, I will. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tiffany, you want me to take that one?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my signal cut out for a second. So prior to COVID, there were numerous locations that operated overflow shelters on any given night. And so the amount of funding here, the $500,000 would be the annual cost so that every single night you could serve 30 to 50 people on those nights. So it's not 30 to 50 people, it's 30 to 50 beds per night. That could be a very large number of people actually. In fact, it turns out to be a rather cheap rate because those are not what we frequently think of as like our enhanced shelters or our really service enriched situations. It's truly overflow, some additional beds, accessing like the convent and a church, things like that. There's minimal staffing that goes with it. There is a vision that there'd be a little bit more supported with it, but it's truly the overflow you've got to leave in the morning.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. I get it now. I'm like 30 to 50 people. That's not, okay. Thank you. And I did see Board Member McHenry's hand before it went down.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Chair. Just thinking about the last chart that you showed, obviously cash is important to the operations of the Regional Homeless Authority. But if an entity were to offer a building to be utilized, land to be leveraged, does this budget allow RHA to evaluate and possibly operationalize or put that into use under our priorities?
Both like, well, no, actually, Gordon, I was asking, could you say that again? There was a lot of pieces in there. I want to make sure I'm capturing it all.
Just there's different ways to provide. The region has utilized hotels. They've utilized unoccupied buildings. There is abundance of land that could be utilized. And so I'm just curious for things that fall within the regional authorities authorized services and responsibilities, does this budget allow us, do we have the staff or the capacity to accept a building from a municipality and put it into use as a shelter or as some sort of stable housing? Do we have the ability to accept land and say, this is land we can accept, and we eventually want to put this kind of support structure on that land? Or is this something or does our budgets not allow us to accept that kind of offer of in-kind support from municipality because we don't have the staffing or we don't have the expertise? So that's the nature of the question, and I can certainly take it offline if I'm not being if I'm being a bit obtuse.
No, no, not at all. Tiffany, is it okay if I respond?
Absolutely.
Okay. The answer is yes and no, which is totally unsatisfying, right? Yes, in the sense that we need to remember that there's numerous programs. I was actually on a meeting earlier today looking at 6 different locations where we have had temporary placement of a facility, and we have to move those over the course of somewhere from 3 to 12 months. And so we always are in need of locating those new options. So yes. It's also no, though, because this is not a proposal. This proposal does not envision doing new services. This is only keeping open what is there. Frequently, for example, the Seattle Times has discussed a provider that has some tiny house villages that they don't have a site to put them on, which, you know, your question would address. But even after that, we need to think about, well, you have to operate that. You can't just stand it up and leave it there. There's functions, if nothing else, the electricity and the water, but also the staffing. And this proposal doesn't include that. There are those 2 items at the end that Tiffany covered. I chimed in a little bit on one of them that says, like, you know, if the world changed, if our economic forecasts of our 2 funders, our primary funders, were dramatically different, we definitely have some things we'd recommend that we would want to utilize those funds for, and it could utilize those kinds of offers. But we're not looking at trying to do new things with this stabilization request. It is like keeping operating the things we have. And that means still those continued conversations, those continued dynamics to find new places.
Thank you. You addressed the essence of my question. I appreciate that.
Is there any more hands up for Sima? I see you. Board Member Reddy.
Thanks so much, Sheriff Floyd. I gotta admit this budget proposal is really sobering and a little bit scary, right? Like I think what you're telling us is essentially that we need more from our primary. We need to ask for a significant increase in funds just to hold steady in terms of services. And as you mentioned, at a time when our primary funders are facing, you know, difficult budgets, and I'm frankly worried that they will not be able to meet these kind of stabilization requests that we have. But I think it is also important that it is laid out exactly kind of what we might lose with if we don't have that kind of funding. I did have a couple quick questions. So does this take into account any new state funding that may have come through in this last legislative session, which I think ended just as you were, you know, creating this presentation? Is there any possibility to increase funds from the state, I guess?
It does not include what was recently approved. It is looking at what is currently in our system and carrying that forward. There is, and Jeff, I would let you step in as well. There is an anticipated deficit in DRF. However, those funds have been backfilled by the state. And so we are anticipating that we will be able to have level funding for our contracts that are receiving those funds, but we are still working closely with our county partners so that we can finalize the numbers for 2025 once they're available to us later next month.
Yeah, it's a good moment to thank the state legislature for doing that. As document recording fees decreased, our state government did the work to locate a way to keep I think it's about $70 million statewide, not just us, to maintain those kinds of programs. And we also should note that the guidance we've gotten from King County has noted that in places where there was pass-through state and federal funding, and this is one of those places, then obviously we should assume the continuation of those programs, or that there's efforts to identify how those are going to. And we don't have the final numbers on that final information. King County didn't have it at that point yet either. But that's a good place to point to. We have on that $25 million of the 11 that's to the county, about more than half of it is looking at places where we'd be looking at cliffs that may be addressed with revenue that is coming that will pass through King County.
The other big question I had is you sort of grouped, all of the programs that had received one-time funding last year into sort of one bucket. Could you tell us a little bit about what those programs have been providing this last year, kind of sort of in general terms, and if we had to, can we prioritize certain of those?
Yeah, I'd prefer not to. I do have the list. I'd rather not talk about them, each in particular, in a public session. That would be alarming for both their clients and their staff. They frankly know. They've gone through this drill for 4 times now. But I think that we could talk about, like, there's some shelter programs, there's youth programs, there's programs that serve individuals that have highly acute needs that are either mental and behavioral health disorders, substance use disorder. There's day centers, so there is a range there. And I think we definitely have learned from programs they've identified for us, what the impacts on their service delivery could potentially be. And so we've also we could aggregate that and talk with you about it separately. I just wouldn't want to be putting that out here at this point. And I also want to make sure it's clear, like, we're not going to just, oh gosh, that's horrible. RHA would do everything we could to make sure that those impacts are foregone, to avoided, whatever the right word is. So if there's means by which we can mitigate some of those losses, find ways to, braid or offset funds, that we would absolutely be undertaking that kind of work. What we can do at this stage and with this budget proposal is just identify our best estimates of what things cost. And obviously, as we go through implementation, we do the best we could to make sure that we have the best system possible.
Thank you, Jeff, Tiffany, and James. Is there any more hands or questions? Seeing none, I would like to thank you for your presentation and thank you for taking time to come to the implementation board and keep us abreast.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, look at here. Even after all that, I thought I really messed up our time, board, but it looks like I have 10 minutes left, and guess what? I'm going to grace you back with that time. I'd like to adjourn the meeting now. Thank you for everyone who came out, those in the room, those on Zoom, the board members. Thank you for giving up your time to this much needed place and space. I appreciate all of what you have to give and to offer at this implementation board. It is very important that we come together as a community and unity to listen, to hear, and to uplift, encourage, and empower, and understand and give each other grace as we help the RHA continue to be the viable a part of this community that it can be. So at this moment, I'd like to thank you all for your time. Thank you for our presenters, and I'd like to give you back the next 8 minutes.
Motion to
Can I have a
adjourn?
motion to adjourn? Thank you.
So move, Pastor Anderson.
Thank you, Pastor Anderson.
Mhm.
Any
Second.
opposed? No, it looks like everybody's happy to go.
Take care. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye
you
now.
so very much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was going,